my name's Vanessa Stoikov and I'm the founder and CEO of Evolution Media Group. In this program, we're bringing leading experts in their field together with decision makers and influencers who are helping to solve some of the wicked problems we face as a global society. Watching this conversation is a live audience of experienced financial advisors who will later join us in the conversation. So let's take a look at our first wicked problem.
Today's wicked problem is, how do more people access good financial advice? Declining advisor numbers combined with high compliance costs has made financial advice unaffordable for the masses. So how can we lower the cost and increase access for people who need help?
So what do the people in the middle of this wicked problem think? Why are advisors leaving the industry, and what can we do to plug the hole? With me are Steve Davison, the Chief Commercial Officer at Midwinter, and Sarah Abood, the CEO of the Financial Planning Association. Now, we're going to talk to some advisors to hear their views on technology. Are they doing it? Do they want to do it? Where the quality of advice reviews leaving them? So let's cross to Kim Payne. And Kim, welcome. And who is the first question from?
Thanks, Vanessa, Sarah and Steve. What an amazing conversation that you've got started. I mean, affordability and accessibility of advice is such a big issue. I've been out mingling with our studio audience and just hearing on what their take is on this. Now, these are advice professionals. This is affecting their everyday and they're exposed to what works and what doesn't with clients. So I've pulled aside a number of them who are going to share their views and their thoughts to add to this very important conversation. The first advisor that I'd like to talk to and who's going to share her thoughts is Deborah Kent from Integra Financial Services. So Deborah, what are your thoughts on the conversation that just took place that relates specifically to the work that you're doing in your own business?
What I got out of that is the issue around providing advice to more Australians. It is a problem for advisors like myself with a business like mine. It's a small business. We would like to provide advice to more people. The issue is providing advice requires a lot of work and a lot of paperwork, and that puts a lot of cost to the advice. So whether we're seeing somebody who has a simple situation or a complex situation, we still have to do the same amount of paperwork, and of course that's where the cost comes in.
How does that also affect the client? I'm assuming that they've got to be involved in giving you the information to start with. How does it play out for them and their desire to keep seeking advice?
Yeah, look, they do have to provide a lot of advice, and quite frankly, a lot of people say to me, why do you need that much? You know, because there is a lot of things that we go through. We basically lay them out bare and we get every single piece of information about their life and what they want to do with their life as well. And because of that, it creates a lot of work for them as well. And we need to make sure we've got the paperwork to back up our advice. So we're looking for them to provide a lot of that to us. So it is very complex, and sometimes it confuses people as well, and it can be quite daunting.
So, absolutely. And do you think that technology can solve this problem? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think technology can solve the problem. There are ways of digitally doing this, but not everybody wants to do digital advice. You know, computers sometimes scare people and they worry about people accessing their information. So we can use digital to do things like fact finds and get things back into us in a quick and easy format, but it's getting the client to do that. And I think digital is something that practices need to implement more in their businesses so we can try and reduce the cost.
So when you're talking about the cost, what about the kids of some of your clients? So it sounds like it's really expensive. Yeah. And how can they afford it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question, because we'd love to provide advice right through the family. And in a lot of cases in my business, we end up doing that. The issue is that most children are referred to us for a very simple situation, which is consolidate some super, look at how they can set up their mortgage, savings plans, things like that, right? Now, that still takes us the same amount of work as if someone was coming in for a complex piece of advice. So for us, we don't turn anyone away. So if one of our clients refers one of their children, we do deal with them, but our business loses money on that. We basically, we're giving away our advice to a large degree.
Wow. And just one last question on that, Deborah, before we wind up and hear what some of the other advisors have to say. You're saying you're losing money. Who's actually paying for that, though? Is it the client, so the child? Is it your client? Or who actually does pay the bill?
Look, most of the time the child pays for the advice. We set the advice at a very reasonable fee, and we also help them out by saying they can pay it off monthly if they want, to make sure that we get them the advice they need. In the odd occasion, the parent will pay for the advice, but that's very rare.
Thank you. So some great insight there from Deborah Kent, just addressing some of these challenges around the affordability and accessibility of advice. Now let's hear from another advisor.
Thanks, Kim, and that's a great question, Deb. Let's throw to Sarah and see what you think. What do you think? Is it going to work?
That is a great question, and that particular issue is being talked about a lot as part of the current proposals. So the good advice test that Deborah's referenced is to ensure that the outcome of the advice is good for the client at the time, based on the information that the provider has available to them. The other piece of that Deborah's referenced is, how do we test what we mean by best interests? Because advisors under these proposals will still have a best interest duty, because financial advisors and planners are subject to a regulated code, and that code does still require advisors and planners to act in the best interests of their clients. What could go is what is called the safe harbour steps. So that's an option that people have now to go through that set of ticker box compliance matters to demonstrate that they've acted in the best interests of their clients. So one of the potential impacts of the reforms is that while advisors retain a best interest duty towards their clients, they would not have to go through that really prescriptive ticker box process. They would use their professional judgment to ensure that the advice is in the best interests of the client. The second or third, I think, piece of that is there are some people who would be able to provide advice under these proposals who are not fully qualified financial advisors and planners. They're not relevant providers in the language of the legislation. So those are the people who would be providing good advice, but potentially would not be subject to the best interest duty that Deborah spoke about. And that is driving a lot of debate and question right now, because it's really important that we're solving the problem of getting more advice to more Australians, but we're not going backwards in terms of ensuring that the advice that Australians are receiving is good, that we're not going back to the days of when these people might have just been product salespeople, for example. And I know that's not the intent of the changes that have been proposed, but we really want to ensure that this advice that's being delivered by people who are not fully qualified financial advisors, that is just about their interest in a particular product, is good and is going to leave the client in a better off position. And that is generating debate right now.
Okay. Well, Kim, who else have you got for us to ask a question?
Thanks, Vanessa. We've now got our next advisor, John Kuo from Sierra Wealth. So, John, you've just been listening to this incredibly important conversation. What's your biggest takeaway that's affecting you and your business at the moment?
I find that clients don't really, their issues is that they have too much information. They are bombarded with information, and that anything that will be helpful is having technology that is able to streamline all existing information in a manner that's easier for them to understand, for them to determine whether or not there's a problem that they need to see a financial planner to solve.
Do you think it's an issue that clients have so much information that they don't know where to start?
Yes, indeed. Often, a lot of the time that I spend the first couple of hours just to understand and go through all their financial data and then summarize it for them.
So I guess a big part of, if this could be addressed, would technology be part of the solution, do you think?
If technology is able to streamline financial data from multiple providers and make it simple for the average consumer to look at their information and go, oh, we may have a problem here, that will be very helpful.
And once they have that problem, what do they do with it?
They can choose to have a chat with somebody, or they can say, well, we can deal with this ourselves. But at least the consumer has sufficient information to make that decision, to determine whether or not this is information they can solve themselves, or if they can't, whether it's worthwhile paying someone to do that for them.
And do you think at the moment that part of the challenge around affordability and accessibility is that even if they know they've got the problem, they can't afford to get it solved?
Well, I think the issue perhaps is that there isn't a transparent pricing structure when it comes to advice. Because cost of advice, it does depend upon the complexity of the client's circumstances.
And do you think many clients are going to be more aware of this in the future, and would that allow them to come and get more advice, do you think?
That's really hard to say because, again, different clients, they have different understanding of their personal situation. They have different expectation of what the cost of advice can be. And to be honest, they also have different expectation of what advice will actually provide them.
How can we fix this, do you think? Just, really quick, click of the fingers.
Make advice transparent. Make advice or the technology behind it very simple to use, and making the decision-making process, i.e. if we do A, B, C, X, Y, Z will happen.
Oh, I love that simplicity. So we've just heard from Sarah and Steve. If you've got a question for one of them to try and address this, what would it be?
I have a question for Sarah, and this is a joke that I heard a little while back, which is, how do you stop dead a conversation with a stranger? You told them you're a financial planner.
Okay, so how do you stop dead a conversation? You tell them you're a financial planner. So how can Sarah be of help in answering this question?
I guess my question to Sarah is, being the chairperson of the FPA, what is a 10-year plan that can revive the profession of financial planners and attract more young people into the industry and solve the problem of not enough advisors serving Australians?
Beautiful. So back over to you, Vanessa. And Sarah, another one for you. And this one's, of course, back onto the whole supply side. And how can we get more advisors coming through the ranks so that the problem that we've just heard from John doesn't carry over the next 10 years?
Thanks, Kim. And John, not everyone looks at financial planners and doesn't want to continue the conversation. I love them. But look, Sarah, first for you, how this 10-year plan that John speaks of, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to turn it around a bit sooner than 10 years. But, he's quite right that I think for many people, we're not sure what it is that financial planners do. And I think that, the barbecue stopper kind of element of that is, the fact is that what we do is quite complex. And, as John outlined there, it's different for everybody. Essentially we're sorting people out. We're helping them achieve their financial dreams, helping them clarify and quantify their goals and helping them achieve them. But it's very hard to start unpacking the process of how you go about that because it is different for everybody. And I think one of the great things about having more financial planners is we have more people out there explaining to people what it is that we do for people. We transform people's lives. The job that a financial planner does is so important. And we know from surveys of consumers that people who have an advisor love their advisor. They believe that advisor has added so much value to their lives beyond just leaving them in a better financial position. They feel more confident about their financial affairs. They know that they're going to achieve their goals. In fact, many people even say that having a financial planner actually helps their mental health. So the scope of the relationship is incredible and it's broad. And I think we need to articulate that not just to consumers, but also to people who might be considering coming into financial planning as a role, because I think that's a great proposition for someone who's thinking about, what do I want to do with my life? Would I like an opportunity to help people transform their lives? If that's a big aspiration, financial planners can do that. And a lot of what we're focusing on through the Financial Planning Association, we're working with the universities, we're working with career counsellors, we're working with a whole range of people to ensure that the next generation of potential financial planners understand just what can be achieved and what they can do in this profession. So, that's what I'm incredibly excited about.
Signing up myself, really. I'm like, Steve, our firstborns, we should send them to financial advisors.
That'd be great. We need as many as we can get.
I love the passion, and I believe in great financial advice. I've been an advocate my whole career and write fiction books about financial advisors. It's scary, really. Steve, something John mentioned there, if there was technology that could plug in multiple data points, and as he's talking, I'm looking at you going, can you do that? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many elements to that too, right? Because there's so much information. There's been no shortage of new products released to market over the decades, and they keep growing and growing, but the number of advisors keeps shrinking and shrinking. And so, yeah, John's point's really relevant. How do you see through all of that information, or more importantly, how do your clients or prospective clients see through that information? So, yeah, there's definitely concepts of being able to consolidate that information. There are not necessarily formal industry standards around how product providers can supply that information. More could be done in that space, but we definitely bring that information together in one spot today through our business, and then when we present that back as a sort of a picture of a client's assets, their liabilities, their income, their expenses, etc., to try and give a whole of wealth picture of what's happening, to simplify it a little bit, to John's point. But it is, I mean, it's just really interesting around. I think about my daughter. She's 19. She's probably had 5 jobs now, and every time it's like, Dad, should I stay in this super fund or should I get a different one now? I've got this app, for my banking. Should I bring the super into that? And it's like, sorry, I can't give advice on that sort of thing. But that's it.
What, to your own daughter?
But that's having grown up in financial
Disclaimer.
services, right? but it just highlights that there's a whole segment of the population that aren't even seeing an advisor or considering an advisor, and we need to get those people to get started in some way. And I think to Sarah's point, advisors do amazing work. I've always had an advisor through my life, and they add so much value, but it's very intangible. And so how do we move from sort of don't tell me what to do, but show me how to do it for a segment of the population that actually want to do a bit more themselves, or advisors just cannot physically deal with because there's not enough.
Okay, well, it is a wicked problem, but there are solutions coming out, and I think, it even seems like we're in a better government position, to be honest, as far as getting things moving forward. Yeah. So it seems like we're on the right path, at least if we don't have all the answers yet. Okay, we'll go back to Kim, another advisor, and their commentary.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. Let's keep this conversation going. Wow, we're getting some incredible insight. I've just been out speaking to the audience and I've pulled aside Shane Summer from Shedforth Financial. Shane, wow, what are your thoughts on this conversation that are affecting you in your business right now today?
Look, technology is amazing. It allows us to capture a lot of data, but one thing it's not always capturing is people's emotions.
Well, people have emotions, and how does that impact the affordability and accessibility of advice?
So you need to meet with the person and talk to them through their emotions and what's right for them, because people can arrive with the same financial situation, but the outcomes for them will be different based on their own goals and objectives.
And how do you think you can get access to this information in a way that still captures the heart of it, but without it being such a laborious process?
Data collection, unfortunately, is always going to be laborious when you've got to provide all of those details about your financials and your assets and all of the things, all the money coming in, money going out. But what we'd really like to capture, and what we capture nowadays through discussion, is how people feel about those finances.
And do you think that's an issue that has stopped people from getting advice in the past, that they've kind of thought it was all just about numbers?
Possibly. So sometimes people think, I just need to look at those numbers and I'll make a change. So you could plug all of your details in and say, I earn this and I spend this. But if it tells you, when you've plugged all the data in, that you're spending too much, it's very easy to go and change that figure and say, oh no, I don't spend that much, it's actually this. And in some ways kid yourself that you're going to actually reduce those expenses. You might need someone to help you remain accountable, like a coach would, about going to your fitness class, for example.
And that's definitely a role an advisor could play if you didn't have the challenges of technology on top of it. And do you think those out there that aren't getting advice would come to see an advisor if they knew this?
I think so, because it's a coaching perspective. It's not necessarily drilling down on, oh, you've spent too much on takeaway this month. It's all about, this is the impact of spending money on takeaway this month. Similarly to how a coach would say, hey, you've ruined everything by having a burger and fries on Friday afternoon and a few drinks at the pub. We can say that expense, this is what it's costing you over the long term. And then the person can make the choice whether or not they want to indulge in that or not.
Can I say, I think part of the reason too why some people might not get advice is this, right? That I don't want you telling me what I can and can't do, because, I don't want to pay money for you to say I can't have the burger and fries.
Absolutely. And we try not to focus on that. It's It doesn't matter where you spend it, it's how much you spend that's going to make the difference.
And that's where I guess if technology played a role that could capture some of the emotional side, I reckon you've got a really good question then that you might want to be posing to Steve. Am I correct? I can feel it coming.
Absolutely. So Steve, could you tell us, how is technology starting to capture the emotional part or behavioural part of people's finances?
So over to you, Vanessa, and one for Steve. And how do you believe that technology is going to get right to the heart of what's going inside people's feelings and emotions? Nice, easy one for you.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Kim. And Shane, you know, that is the question of the century, isn't it? As far as emotions, feelings, real people, advisors coach people, right? They do. So how can technology assist that, at least, if it can't replace it?
Yeah, it's a ripper of a question, and I don't want to give up the schooner and a hamburger on a Friday night either, right? So it's,
I was thinking the same thing.
But you know, how people think, feel, and act with money is really interesting, right? And everyone's different, and so I think it's a fabulous question around where innovation can come to the table and start to create new ways, not only to help the individual client of an advisor do that, but perhaps give tools to advisors to actually, again, codify or take out any biases or perceptions we have. There's a lot of evidence that we as human beings may make the wrong judgment call on someone. So advisors are very good at working through and helping their customers understand who they are and what they should be doing. Money's just fuel to get to an outcome. It's fueling the destination on the way to the destination, effectively. So some of those tools can actually they can sit in technology. They could be used by advisors to help exactly what Shay's really good at doing, but even take it further.
Thanks to Steve and Sarah for leading us in this conversation, and a special thanks to our studio audience. Our next Wicked Problem is completely different, but just as vexing. Here's a sneak peek. Australia has been late to the party on sustainability for a lot of reasons.
We're now moving on from the conversation of should we do this or not, but how do we do this? And get ready for more shades of grey.
We need to invest with the thoughts around ESG, and if we do that well, we'll actually deliver better returns in the future.
Join us next time on Wicked Problems, Visionary Investors. I'm Vanessa Stoikov, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.